Victoria, like many girls at her tender age, got married. Everything was as usual: dating, love, a proposal, a wedding. It was the same as with many girls. Victoria was happy, and moreover, as her friends thought, she was unspeakably lucky. Her husband was not a millionaire, but a very wealthy man. All the girls were jealous. Many, of course, sincerely wished her happiness, but there were those who were jealous, and even stopped communicating with Vika. Just like she owed them something. Victoria did not know at first that the guy she was dating was rich, and that was good for everyone. First, she fell in love with him, and then she found out she got a little extra surprise. The guy wasn't hiding anything, they just communicated on the internet and got to know each other somehow by chance. Vika didn't even remember how it happened, that they started to correspond in some comments to the post, and then switched to private correspondence, calls, and meetings. Vika was not in the habit of surfing through other people's accounts and looking at pictures, searching for something. As a rule, a profile picture was enough for her. Whether there were pictures from the beach at some luxury resort was not important. Now we have a lot of luxurious vacation spots in our country. There were photos of him near a car with his friends. Vika did not ask what kind of car he had or how much he earned. She liked to communicate with the guy as a personality. Maybe that's what attracted him to her. Although he says that he fell in love as soon as he saw her photo on the internet and was pleasantly surprised that she was honest, there was no Photoshop or filters on her picture. Victoria had nothing to hide. She was beautiful without all of that stuff. He gave her a small Volkswagen Juke after the wedding, and they went on a cruise on the Mediterranean Sea. By the way, it was a very exhausting experience. Her head was spinning. Everything was mixed up. The cities, the ports and capitals, the people. It would have been better to go to a country house or a vacation home. Vika did not like all this luxury, glitz, pompousness, and high prices, but they had that trip, stacked photos in the family album.
Also, if you have not done so already, please subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell to get inspired by these animal stories every day. Now back to the story.
In the middle of Russia, on a lake or river, maybe because she was a rare guest there. As a child, her parents tried to take her on vacations to the sea, sometimes to a sanatorium or a boarding house. Vika went on a camping trip once, without an overnight stay. By the way, I hasten to disappoint. Do not expect a dirty story. There will be no illegitimate children and mistresses who could ruin Victoria's and her husband's life. They're doing just fine. But Victoria had some disputes with her mother-in-law. That's a different matter. Then they always made up, and either Vika bought a cake and went to make up, or her husband's mother bought Vika's favorite cakes and came for the same purpose. They all lived peacefully and harmoniously, but her husband told her not to have pets. She asked him very much, but he was against it. They made the house dirty and smelly and caused all kinds of insects. He could not be persuaded, but he had no allergies to animals and no childhood traumas. What's more, his mom had a cat at home. "If you want it, go to my mother's house and take care of her cat as much as you want," her husband said. Vika put up with it. About a year and a half after their wedding, a baby boy was born. They named him Yegor, and Vika was no longer worried about animals. She began to think, thank God her husband did not allow it. She already does not have enough strength. Yegor cried almost constantly. Her mother-in-law said that her son was the same, and that Vika should get used to it. Yegor would scream till the age of 1 year. And what if she had to clean up after the cat or take the dog for a walk? They were right about not having a pet. The doctors said that Yegor should be outside more often, and that the child should be able to sleep outside, and then everything will be fine. But where are you going to get fresh air on the 16th floor in the middle of the stone jungle in the center of the city? There are only cars and exhaust fumes, and you can't even open the windows properly. The smog hangs over the city. A Volkswagen helped out a little. Victoria took Yegor out of town for some fresh air and a walk, but it's hard to go somewhere with an infant. You have to take so much stuff with you, not forgetting anything. Victoria performed her maternity duties heroically, but not every day. In the spring, her husband suggested that Victoria should move to the country for the summer. They did not have their own summer cottage, but he rented a wonderful house in a quiet village on the riverbank, just as Vika liked, and not too far from the city. He would come quite often, and Vika would not even notice that he was busy at work. Besides, in the village she would be able to play with kittens, puppies, and other animals to the fullest. Victoria packed up Yegor's belongings and moved to the village. It was wonderful there. Victoria and Yegor were like in a fairy tale. Fresh air, fragrant flowers, birds singing, and silence. The first night, Yegor slept like a dead man. Victoria herself even jumped up to him in fear. The boy was sleeping so deeply that he did not even turn his head once. So good. What else does a mother need but a healthy baby's sleep? Yegor's appetite was always excellent. Exploring the surroundings, Victoria found a huge stone on the riverbank, as if it were some ancient giant monster that crawled out of the river on the shore, pensive, tired, fell asleep, and turned to stone. The weather was warm, even hot, but it was still too early to swim. The water was still cold. Victoria would come to the river in her little car, climb on that rock with Yegor, and they would sunbathe. It was quite warm on the stone. It didn't even have time to cool down overnight. Victoria laid a blanket, snuggled up on Yegor, and lay down next to him and sunbathed. Her husband would be surprised when he came for the weekend, Victoria thought. She would have a tan no worse than one from a resort or a tanning salon. One day, it was just an ordinary day. Victoria and the baby snuggled up on a stone, covered her face with her hat, and was thinking. Before she noticed, she fell asleep outdoors in the sunshine. The woman woke up abruptly, as if someone had pushed her. The sun was covered by a cloud, and it was getting cold. Vika looked at the child, and a freezing cold seized her soul. Her voice was stuck in her throat in a clump. She couldn't breathe or scream. She couldn't do anything at all because of the fear. A huge, wild owl was sitting on a stone next to Yegor. Victoria knew a little about nature and remembered something about owls being supposed to sleep during the day, but this one was sitting next to her son and pecked the infant's eyes out. Victoria wasn't just numb, she was so terrified that the poor mother couldn't even wave her hand or shoo the bird away. She could only let out a strange, snake-like hiss, but the owl didn't even pay any attention to it, continuing to peck greedily. The baby wasn't crying, it wasn't even moving. He's dead, she thought, and then she mustered all her willpower and jumped to her feet and waved her arms, shouting at the top of her voice as loud as she could, "Get out of here!" The owl interrupted its meal, turned its head and looked at Victoria. The bird was very big, and Victoria was no threat to the owl. The owl measured it with an examining glance from head to foot, as if it sighed, spread its wings, which made it seem even bigger, pushed off powerful legs with huge claws, and flew, made a circle over the river, let out a terrible shout, and began to come in a second circle. As it descended, it clearly seemed to Victoria that the owl was not going to give up her prey and would now attack. The woman rushed to the child to cover him with herself, but Yegor was sound asleep, and his eyes were there. The baby was sleeping peacefully, and there was a torn snake by his headboard. In spring, they swarm up and very often crawl out on all kinds of stones to lie on and rest. While they were sleeping, the snake climbed up on the stone and crawled over to the child. It curled up next to the boy in a ball right next to his tender neck, and who knows how it would have ended if not for the bird. How did the bird manage to see the snake next to the baby? The owl was still circling over the scene. Victoria looked up, waved her hand, and shouted a thank you. It was as if the owl had been waiting for that. It flapped its wing and headed off into the woods. Victoria's husband was very surprised by Vika's story. When Yegor grew up, he even allowed him to have small parrots in memory of the bird that saved him. Victoria and her husband later divorced when Yegor was 10 years old, but that's another story. Thank you for listening to the end. Don't forget to subscribe and like and click on the bell not to miss new videos. All the best.
If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and consider sharing it with your friends and family. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next one.